Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to be introduced. Here's a quote that I picked just for this episode. The secret for harvesting from existence, the greatest fruitfulness, and the greatest enjoyment is to live dangerously. Friedrich.
I've done that. I have
My
lived
dear
in.
friend Tony Capullo has lived dangerously.
Yes,
Thank you for coming back.
and I'm still here. I've lived in. There was a movie. It used to be called The Year of Living Dangerously.
What was it about?
I don't know. I never saw it. It was a movie, but um, I'm right now. I'm about to write one called 59 Years of Living Dangerously.
What would the last chapter be?
Well, yeah, it's a really good question. See, that's why you're a good interviewer. We're talking about podcasts. You did that from the hip.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
curious. I mean, knowing you,
Um,
the title. Wow, what's the last chapter going to be? Right, gravestone. Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, the gravestone. We'll show the gravestone, and they'll say on it, "I told you I was sick."
Well, that can be taken in many different ways. What brings that to mind?
I'll tell you what. There's a there's a headstone in Key West, and that's what it says. And I always thought that was very funny.
So, part one of the unpacking of me brought us to this conclusion of, or a new beginning of the curiosity around podcasting. My dear friend Tony Capullo is back, mentor, advisor to many of the greats, integrator, connector of the dots, author, and soon to be doubly author. Thanks for coming back to be what you are.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me. This is our Sunday morning coffee together, right? So that's what it is, right? I got my right. You got your energy drink,
Celsius.
yeah, Celsius. Um, so I want to get into that podcasting thing because you are, uh, you know, a mutual business colleague of ours referred to who's really tough said you were the best interviewer he's ever encountered. And coming from him, who's an international speaker, it's unbelievable. And by the way, I'll talk to you about him in a little bit. But and I think you are. So I want to go into for people listening because we always give them tidbits, right? We always give them chunks of things, right? So it seems to me that everybody in the world, Jay, now everybody wants to have a podcast. Everybody goes out and they get the microphone and they get the camera and they get the right. I know so many people doing this, right? And
Mm.
I mean, I understand it, and it's not a bad thing at all. Some people I don't think are really would make really good really good hosts, very quiet, very somber. I mean, those kind of people. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is about the guests. Let's talk about the guests first, because it doesn't it really boil down to who you have as a guest? Because some like I have seen I have people that call me, as you know, and they go, "Hey, can you give me gas? Can you give me gas?" And I'm like, "Well, like what's the program?" And I'm not going to just suggest somebody go on a program because it's a podcast because you don't know, you just don't know. I mean, I'm not going to ask somebody to do that. So let me ask you this: what is the criteria that you use, or anybody should use, having a podcast? What's the criteria for choosing a podcast guest? Because you're very good at picking.
I'll write this word down, everyone that's listening. Learn.
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 That's a good one. Explain. I know what you mean. Explain.
Well, let's look up the definition. Learn, defined. Gain, a verb, gain or acquire knowledge of a skill in something by study, experience, or be taught. Another one is become aware of something by information or from observation. I'm the host, the listener is the host, or you're the host. There's a there I think there to for the quality to be there, the experience to be there, the values to transfer, learn. Because I'm submitting my control when I go into it with the intention that learn. I know what I know. I think I know what I know. What do they know? Learn forces me to ask myself, why am I doing this?
Do you look at it from what it you ask yourself, is my audience going to learn from this?
I'm going to say it. That's an interesting ping pong. If I go into it as a host,
Yeah,
with learn,
yeah,
the likelihood that they're going to learn is increased beyond whether I'm aware of it or not. If I go
okay,
into it, like I can go into it, my audience, I want my audience to learn. But if I'm not open under the guise that I think I'm open, so it's a self-awareness exercise for the host. Because the host can say, yeah, it's all about the audience, and not being aware of it, not be a professional. Now, and so let's say the context of bringing the most, they're having, if we're a host and we're having guests, the context will be set prior between the guests. Of course, like, all right, you're coming on because this is going to be a debate today.
have you done that?
At this juncture, not yet, although I have a conversation. I've had a conversation with someone after an episode that was willing to come back and do more of a debate, just from being candid and open
Right,
and
right.
building a relationship. So I'm going to say learn, because it's going to open up possibilities for everyone to learn more. If the host, because the host is the person, it's their castle that the guest is coming into.
Right.
Now, they may be a very famous warrior with an army, but
Right.
their army stays outside of the gates.
Okay.
Their army's waiting outside of the gates, and they're coming into the castle to have a conversation with the king or the queen or whoever, because it's their show. This is all subliminal.
So the number one thing, if I heard you right, what you're telling your listeners who want to start a podcast or considering it,
Yeah.
pick guests that force you to learn.
Learn so you can cooperate with your guest and not compete
Okay.
for the benefit of you and the
Or not
audience.
compete. That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's not adversarial. You invite someone on to learn from them. Someone, and now this is let's say, this is, you can, if you're, if we have a podcast, we have a, we have a, we have this opaque, alluring medium of power. Someone that normally wouldn't talk to you without a fee is going to say, all right, I'll come on your podcast, with the presumption that you have power for them, that you're a broker of power. There are people that are going to listen, that they will monetize, they will build their audience. You could have an audience of 2, and they may not even ask. Maybe
What?
1 out of 1,000 will ask.
So some of these questions,
1 out of 100.
some of these questions, by the way, I'm gonna intertwine them. Some will be personal questions for you, and some will be tidbits for the audience, because part of this is me trying to understand I'm fascinated by the way you do what you do. Okay,
Thanks.
yeah, you're welcome. So you learn. So you say learn. I love that. Okay, not compete, not adversarial. Um, and I've said this to you since the first time that we did a podcast, which was probably about 3-4 years ago, maybe. But you're a master of preparation, it comes out in your questions and the way they're dynamic with the guest. And I said to Troy, I said, his preparation is unbelievable. He's like, oh, he knew more about me than I did. I mean, you knew what was on the back of my book, and I forgot about it, right? But you knew, right? You read a quote to me one day. You read a quote to me one day. I didn't realize it was my quote. So, right, talk about the preparation and how important it is. Two things: how you prepare. Actually, three things: how you prepare, what you do if there's not a lot of information on the person, because I'm sure there's something, and what you would suggest to people in terms of preparation and how they go about it. Because I know people who do podcasts. I will tell you that. I'll give you this real quick example. Just I sent a guest to somebody's podcast, and I said to him before I sent the person, I'm sending you this person's bio. Pay particularly close attention to blah, 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 right? It's a key element in the person's background. Okay. The person went to the podcast. I kind of forgot about it. She came back to me and she said, he was nice, but he didn't really know anything about me. What do you mean? And she explained, he didn't even read what I sent him. So I said to him, why didn't you read what I sent you? It's the key part of the whole story. And he's like, oh yeah, I just got busy. See, that's annoying to me, because not because I sent the guest, is because.
So I call that the authority hack.
Okay, so all right, so I just threw a bunch of questions at you. You answer them in any order. Your preparation, it's your preparation.
Just in that piece is important. That reveals that reveals a potential variable for an authority hack. If I can have as many people of greater influence than me through the medium that is this, where people can listen to them, I will get credibility implicitly as a host.
Have you ever not prepared?
So if whether someone's prepared or not, at the detriment of the relationship, the detriment of the guest and the host can still take, I call it the authority hack. They can still take their power just by physically being near them. The example of this would be like Napoleon Hill taking a picture with Andrew Carnegie. They didn't really have a relationship. But a whole lie was built around that. It was just a selfie. So in the year 19, whatever, like
before they worked for a selfie, it was a thing.
It was just a selfie. So if your friend, your client, you're introducing to a show, and the person doesn't prepare, that demonstrates a potential that they're just taking. Life is a give and take. Just taking for too long ends up with you on this podcast talking about this person. Now, you may not be mentioning their name yet, but they're close to that point if they're that much of a taker. So essentially, that's an authority hack that benefits the host. People come into these. I'm come into this. We are doing these shows like for like anything to grow our businesses, to grow our life. How we grow our businesses, how we grow our life reveals our character. So the answer to your question, go back to the preparation. The preparation demonstrates respect. Yeah, the audience can write that word down. Respect. If we look up respect definition, one, a feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievement. How is that not the perfect explanation of I'm having guests come on my show? And number one, a feeling of admiration for someone. I have an admiration for Troy because my friend, colleague, Tony Capullo said, this guy will benefit your audience. He's a good person. Respect, deep feeling of admiration. I also respect you, so it's doubly important that I prepare. or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. So you're introducing our audience to someone with achievements, qualities, abilities of a high caliber. The onus falls on me if I'm not going to disrespect you by, disrespecting Troy. Who am I? Well, what's my role? It's not a debate in this context. It's not even a conversation. The first stage is how can this guest be in their best light? Because ultimately the audience is listening to them, not just me. And it evolves into both as the relationship evolves. So number 2, do regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others. That's respect. So I would say preparation is about respect, and that's my answer.
Is it also about the integrity of your show?
So let's not all shows, it would be unfair to blanket, right? All shows are supposed to be in that dichotomy. This is an interview format. Like, that's how Culture Matters podcast was started, with the intention for me to work on my listening, to lead, because the belief of the Culture Matters podcast and the belief of Culture Matters is to read to write, or read to think, write to develop, listen to hear what is unsaid, and speak to let go. So that third piece, listen to hear what is unsaid, the podcast is a medium for that. It helps me practice listening. So which started to decay as I read more and spoke more. It was like,
why is that? Why do you, I mean, that's interesting. You said as you read more
and spoke more,
you listen less.
Absolutely. It's a diminishing returns of influence and power. People want my opinion, so now I don't have to ask them anything. And so I recognized that in myself as I became a sought after speaker, and I'm a know-it-all by nature, which is not a healthy psychology long term. So I said, okay, well, and I'd been advised by those closest to me, you don't listen well. You're not listening to me. And so at some point, I decide, well, self-help, help yourself. Okay, I got to figure this out now. So all of this is me working on myself in the midst of the public forum. And through this self-development, I become more and more aware of the general contradictions of the culture, which is what I've been speaking to earlier in this episode. That if we're not careful, we end up disrespecting the people that introduce people to us. And if we're not trying to learn, we will get less out of the conversation with whomever it is that comes within our proximity as it relates to a podcast.
I'm going to go back to something you just said, but before I do, I want to go with that. One of the questions I asked you earlier: what do you do? What does somebody do if there's not a lot of information on somebody?
So I came up with a methodology called the Culture Map that I've been flown across the country to help people prepare for interviews.
Okay.
So this is a proprietary technology that manifested itself over time from doing hundreds and hundreds of them, and just drawing from the breadth of experience of consulting and the literature that I've studied. And so at that point, it's kind of ineffable. You don't even need a lot of information to figure things out about people, and then you just turn those presumptions into inquiries. And but to go, let's start with what we do have information with.
Right.
Let's say what we do have information with. And even if there's no information on the internet, we have information on the guest, because we know. So actually, we'll go back. We know we may have an understanding of how old they are. So then we can figure out what year, what year it was at certain ages, and then there's certain events that are Googleable.
Yeah.
You could Google the year and find events, and then you can ask around that. And that leads to curiosities. I mean, a lot of the job is done easy when having a guest on. All people come on into a forum, me included, whether if we're not like without awareness, with whatever our commoditized representation of who we are is, meaning what we normally say when we go on podcast, what we normally say when we're on stage, what we normally say when we're not thinking, is revealed in a public forum. So all of that data, all of that information to a host, it's about being diagnostic versus prescriptive. That's all possibility to ask questions around. Just like when we have these conversations and you're like, whoa, I want to go back over here, but that's
Yeah. Right.
It's a wonderful metaphor, like a real-time exploration of what it is we're talking about. The audience can participate with us through you being curious, being interested, being open. My challenge is I'm as curious as you are with me, with people I dislike as much as strangers. That's something I work on. That's something that, well, it comes less working on. It's more natural to me that I believe helps build culture. So to answer the question, less information. There's always information, because there's information of what the person's going, there's information of like how old the person is, what was going on in the world at certain ages, important ages, the early adolescence, teen years, college years. But if we're real about it, we go to LinkedIn, we're going to find someone's life, where they went to school, what they studied, how many jobs they had, what jobs they were, what years those were, how big are those companies. So anyway, I have a methodology I call the culture map that's not yet open to the public, where they could,
They can use it. Right.
this, but it's been extremely successful for helping people develop relationships. And we both know relationships, and the audience at this point, if you listen to the podcast, relationships lead to resources, right?
Yeah, that's a really good word. I want to ask you, on average, if you can guess, because I know it's gonna vary among the guests. How much time do you spend preparing for one guest?
In the beginning, it was hours, and as I got more adept, I can actually be completely own all of what someone is about in like 15 minutes or less.
Oh, really? Okay.
Like, so what happened was, as I just become more and more masterful, and this is a lesson for anybody. The more one does something, you put all that work in the beginning, and then you could get just effective of a result with less time invested.
Right. It's more efficient. Yeah.
They said that Howard Stern was just given, his team would spend a week on research and then give him 20 pages, 20 minutes before the guest came in, and then he'd flim through it and he had it, and then he'd just be himself. So you can only imagine how many thousands and thousands of hours he put into his craft to get to that point. So, I mean, and ultimately, if someone's in, any salesperson needs to learn how to listen, benefits from relationships, benefits from learning and respecting people. Someone said to me the other day, a friend, he goes, I'm not a good salesperson because I can't sell anything to anyone. I said, that's not a salesperson, that's a liar. You're a good salesperson because you wouldn't sell anything to anyone. He's a very good he is a strong character. And because he had said, what I believe in, I'll sell. And I'll sell it well. And I said, you're misunderstood, meaning the culture has taught you something that has repressed your genius and expanded on falsehood. Because you just said to me, you can sell something you believe in, but you don't think you're a good salesperson because you can't sell anything to anyone, even what you don't believe in. I said, someone that could sell anything to anyone is just a liar. Someone that sells something they believe in, That's a person of strong character. That's a good salesperson. Because
Do
the
you
person
think
that could sell to anyone, it's a transaction. That's not a long-term relationship. The likelihood of referrals is low or nil. Someone that sells to something they believe in, they now can build a relationship that will lead to referrals, that will lead to culture. So this all has to do with podcasting, because podcasting is a mini. It's a live. It's like watching, the audience is partaking in a relationship building, which essentially is a sale. What people are selling changes, but there's an exchange going on. There's a host and there's a guest, and they're exchanging thoughts, ideas, emotions. They're exchanging. They're doing what we do when we meet people over coffee and we figure out, are we selling each other, or are we going to work together to sell someone else? You could break an economy down that simply. It's like, are we selling each other right now at the table? Are we exchanging goods and services? Or are we going to work together for other people to exchange goods and services with us?
so? For your listeners, what does somebody do if they're hosting a podcast and the guest starts getting adversarial?
I
Have
learned.
you had that? Have you had that happen?
Yeah, the audio, yes. And if anything, I'm going to, in my weak moments, it was most likely me stirring it.
Okay, but
So here's an example.
Some people easily stirred. So
yes, and I believe that I and human beings, depending on how deep the cut is, the response will be stronger or weaker. And depending on my awareness of the cut in the first place, I'm going to black out or not at a higher or lesser sense. So if the guest says something that fundamentally goes against my core beliefs, I might lose track of space and time and emotionally respond in defense, contradicting the role of the mediator, of the host, and making it much too personal. And I may not be able to actually recognize that because it's so emotional until I look back and say, whoa, I lost it there. I wasn't self-aware enough to control, to be even aware, to then do something with my emotions, to regulate my emotions. So one of the values of podcasting is for the host, it can help develop one's self-awareness. Because if I'm interrupting the guest when they say something, their theory, and make it all about me, then that's a blind spot that connotes potentially a blind spot in my development.
So, but to that point, let me ask you this. And you said, you lose your equilibrium and it becomes a little bit adversarial. And now but doesn't that add to the entertainment value of the podcast?
Well,
people, have you ever seen two people in an interview where the interviewer starts? I did, and
oh yeah,
it's actually entertaining. I mean, it's
well, plenty of things are entertaining that are, the Kierkegaard's alluded to. It's with a long paragraph, but the clown comes out from backstage, the audience is clapping, the clown is saying fire, 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 the audience claps louder, and he believes, and everyone burns to hell, and that's how the world is going to end. Everyone is entertained thoroughly. Thoroughly entertained, but the truth is not, not understood and synthesized. So in that spirit is absolutely, it's entertaining. Why do we watch these people arguing on TLC? And when it comes to the relationship, though, like having an argument with a friend or an enemy, in that situation, for me to get value and to create value, to create trust, it would be, I would argue that it comes down to my humility and my curiosity. We can be adversarial in the idea, like we're disagreeing about the idea. For us to avoid being adversarial about each other, the onus comes down to, am I going to be curious, again, humble, patient, understanding, empathetic in the moment. So that way we're arguing the idea, not arguing each other. We're not attacking each other.
I saw an interview years ago, Mike Tyson, right? Who's kind of off the rails anyway.
Yeah.
Went to Canada to promote. He was doing this. He did this show, and he was doing it in Vegas. He was doing all. It was called Tyson. He would just sit on the stage and talk about his life. So he had a manager, and he and the manager go on this television show. And it was supposed to be a 10-minute interview. And so the guy's interviewing him, and the guy asked him a question about being in prison. You know, he's in prison for rape, right? So he asked him a question. He asked him a question, and Tyson didn't like it. So Tyson responds to him with, "Well, you're a piece of shit." And the guy goes, "Okay." So the guy tries to change the subject, and Tyson's just sitting looking at him. Well, I answered that question, but I just want you to know you're a piece of shit. And that's all he kept saying to him. You know what? You're a piece of shit, right? And the guy was trying to be nice, trying to. Okay, so tell us about where's the tour going from here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter where it goes from here because you're a piece of shit, right? And the guy goes, "Come on, Mike," right? And then he starts using F-bombs, right? The guy's, "Mike, we're on live TV." He goes, "I don't give a shit," because he was mad, right? So the guy finally said, "Okay, well, listen, thanks for coming," right? He cut it, but I thought to myself, can you imagine being that? Well, first of all, you'd have to be an idiot to ask him a question because he's already off the rails, right?
But Mike probably picked up the disingenuousness because there's a lot of his unsaid.
Yeah.
Someone will know if you're out to get him for your own selfishness.
Yeah.
He probably picked up on the disingenuousness, the contrivedness. First of all, telling someone to tell them something about something is not a question. That's a statement that infers curiosity. So that's a form of control. I focus on open questions in this format as a way to actually get underneath whatever the subject matter is in there. Like I don't tell people to tell me things. I've never done that. I've never done like you listen to the Culture Matters podcast. You're not going to hear me say, "Tell me when you were 7." I don't tell people I don't tell people to tell me things. You know.
That is a really good piece of advice for people that are listening. Don't tell people to tell you things. Ask questions.
And maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's utility in some context for why it would be helpful. Like I don't want to presume that because language, right, reveals. So, but I'm like I look at that as a closed. Because it's a statement that infers a response, right? It projects, it influences a response. So, asking, when you were in high school and you were in the chess club, did that influence or did the influences within that culture have any value, in hindsight, all these years later, when you're building your company? Was there someone there that that visual, and it may or may not, like it helped. The more the guest is thinking, the more we're going to learn.
Have you ever had anybody give you like really short one-word answers where you're like, "Oh my God, just please answer," because you get stuck, right?
Absolutely.
Like if I said to you, you asked me a question, I'm like, yes, I don't know. I mean, would you eventually go, okay, this isn't going to go well because now you don't have to publish the podcast, right? I mean, you have the choice of.
Yeah, we publish all of them. I mean, I look at that as a challenge. I had someone send me a Chat GPT recording, like I guess it was recording the whole thing, and like it's happened a couple times, and like it said how many questions were asked. It was like 200 questions. It's like,
oh really?
It looked like a deposition.
It was something you did?
No, like there was. So I ask a lot of questions in these interviews. That's
yeah.
It's like I got this feedback, and it was like it showed how many questions were asked. But to answer your question, the more brief. So, this is a scenario. Let's say someone really they either pontificate or they're just a storyteller, because it could be looked at either way, where they're long-winded, let's say. the value of the host will be, a lot of times it's counterintuitive. Maybe don't interrupt them. Depending on it's understanding the nuance of, is this helpful to them? Is this helpful to the audience? Is this helpful to me? It's figuring out what's the best interest of everyone at some level of average to bring the conversation back. But a lot of it is the art of not interrupting or not taking over the conversation or not asking a contrived question that maybe was in one's mind based on new information that came. There's the art form to it. Then there's the side of going deeper, what and how to go deep, and reading the audience, meaning the guests, like where's their comfort level. I like to learn as much as I can of the guest, because I'm looking to build quality actual relationships with people in the real world that simultaneously help the audience get true value from human conversation. And there's a lot of people on the show that are not famous, that are not known. Some are unbelievably successful and some are not. They're up and coming. I just like them as people. And I want to lean into these actual relationships. So the Culture Matters podcast is like my culture in the internet. All these people on this show, I know, or they're introduced to me by people like you, that I want to respect them. And by respecting you, I want to respect you, I want to respect them. So it's like anyone listening to the Culture Matters podcast is going to see this, in essence, my community that's building and evolving.
So when you get into people who are long-winded, have you ever cut anybody off? And I'm going to tell you why I asked that. Because I have had conversations with people on a business level where I will ask them a question and they answer it within the first minute. But then they go on. And by the time they're done, I forgot what the question was, because they go down, they start here. Absolutely. And then they go down here and I'm like, okay, come back, right? Because I don't remember what I asked, right? In their minds, I guess they think, oh, I have to say this, and I understand it. Have you ever cut anybody off?
I would ask, if like I said earlier, it depends on, does it help them? Does it help the audience? And what role is it helping me? Am I influencing that? If lesser than a cut, I look for a question within it. I do the best I can to ask a question within that. That's a natural thing to do in a dialogue. What do you mean by that at this point here? And I'm the more that I believe that people are listening, the audience, if it'll be natural to ask. I won't necessarily say, I've never, not to my knowledge on the show, please stop elucidating. I want to ask you the next question. More so look like, hey, what about, and there's so much gold.
Right. So for
that's
those
the role of the
listeners,
host. That's a responsible thing for the host. That's a responsible thing for for an advisor to do, for a coach, for a mentor, is to help
for your listeners. Let's say I'm a podcast host, and I say, Jay, I get these people, they're long-winded, and I know there's other questions in what they're saying, but I don't know how to stop them. How do you do it without interrupting? Because there's people that just they don't just talk, they ran. I've been recipient of what I say this. I do this to somebody sometimes. Hey, hold on. In a conversation.
I think this is an important
time out, because if you don't, they'll just keep going.
I think this is important. So this is an important piece. It would be unfair to the community for me to try to build it in my own image. So what can we draw from some of the insights that I'm sharing about the value of being open and curious with the guest, the value of practicing learningness as a value, the value in doing the best one can to respect the guest and respect whoever introduced them by respecting the guest. the podcast is going to reveal the host. So maybe I can, there's things I can learn from the more aggressive, the more, I can learn as much from those that don't listen as those that don't listen can learn from me in this medium. I want to say that because there's the podcast is going to reveal the character of the host, and ultimately whatever culture that they're building. Culture manifests itself, how people relate to one another. There's many ways that can manifest itself in. And I do have an opinion of what the right culture is. I do have an opinion of that. And so I think that's an important piece to mention on this, that it's like, yes, there are going to be people. Yeah. So I think the more prepared I've been with and the more practicing these values, that doesn't happen in a deconstructive way on the show as much as it happens in a constructive way on the show. And we can all tell the difference when someone's talking to themselves versus talking with the audience, and the host is kind of brokering that interaction. The host is brokering that interaction. The conversational episodes, I've evolved as I've evolved in this process of developing self, building my community, the audience benefiting from that. Look at us today. Look at us having this conversation. This is something that happened hundreds of episodes in as a reflection of my evolution. So the listening, the interview format, I have episodes now where it's like straight up interview. I have episodes now where it's me being interviewed. We have episodes where we have launching where there's a bunch of us having conversation. I have episodes where I have friends come on and we philosophize about Wall Street and hot topics and things. So the podcast is quite literally an evolution of me. And I think it reveals people's character and their cultures. And I think it would be helpful for people to take it with grave seriousness of what podcasting actually is for our culture and our business culture. And so I think I can learn as much from those that interrupt and create conflicts, unreconcilable conflicts, as they may be able on podcasting, as they may be able to learn from the interviews that I've performed.
You talked about, use the word evolved.
Yeah.
Right, with your, what are there any things we can expect to see over the next year? Changes in Culture Matters and how you do things, or are there any format changes? Any, I don't know. What is there anything? I mean, you're doing so well. Is it leave it well enough alone, or is it no? There's some stuff. There's some stuff I want to like trying to do. Right? I know we're doing a round table type thing, right?
We're going to be doing a lot more of that. There's a lot more that we're going to be doing. The new book is going to open up a lot of channels because it's going to be very, very clearly broken down of what I believe culture is, why it's relevant, how to actually curate that in business and in general culture, some of the bigger problems. Whereas 30 Days of Thought was more of a self-development process for an individual to go through reading and writing their thoughts in the book and sharing their thoughts online that people pursued in 30 Days of Thought 5-6 years ago when it came out. The new book is going to be this platform for, what the heck is Culture Matters methodology? Who is Jay Doran to all these companies, helping corporate companies, corporate cultures evolve and so on and so forth. So there's going to be a lot of evolution in 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, speaking much, much, much more, Fortune 1000 and so on. And as far as the podcast, we're going to be going from 2 episodes released a week. The goal is 4. So that's a process. That's not something easy to do, but all sorts of different variations of, the reading to think. I've planned for some time of picking a book and dialoguing on it for a podcast, writing to develop, reading some of the writing that I've done, and have that review and talk about the value in writing. Listening to Heroes Unsaid, the interviews are not going to stop. The interviews are not going to stop.
Right. So I want to ask you because I don't want to get off of this without asking you about to tell us more about um, the book and when the book will be available. I know you
Yeah,
just
I don't have
process.
any information on that at this time. I
Well,
just,
you have any information you can tell us about what the book is and
yeah. So the goal is that someone that picks up the book, which I have the base of the book, which is the format, is done. So then it comes down to breaking down each chapter into the subheadings and subcategories and filling in with there's the knowledge, there's the data, and then there's what analogies and stories and diagrams will be used to express that information. So I think the I'm not starting until I have this one goal complete, which was to we had talked about this 100 podcasts in 100 days and all of
wow.
that mania, right? This is podcast recording number 77. And I'm going to finish early. So I'm going to start the book early. So, but by the end of the audience that picks up the book, they'll have an interest in business. They may not even have an interest in culture. Seriously, because I want to call it Culture Doesn't Work, because I'm playing on the fact that it doesn't actually work unless ... So each chapter is culture doesn't work when we don't work. Like that's going to be one of the chapters. So there's lessons within it. And my goal is to outline the various contradictions that arise in growing business successfully, in bringing in people like myself, firms like ourselves, where we can be hurtful versus helpful, where we can be helpful. So the goal is that the person reading it will have a roadmap of what not to do in growing their business, who not to grow it with, who to grow it with, and the value in culture, quite literally, when it comes to story and building language and building rituals and getting people to build their careers within companies when, well, we all intuit it at some level. Why would I want to build someone else's company when I could just build my own? That people have to have a real deep, meaningful reason to do that. And I believe that's going to become more and more and more important for companies to understand how to create that atmosphere in the future as more and more people have the opportunity to be, well, so put it this way, more and more people have the opportunity to be perceived as successful when they're not, to get the love and belonging piece of success and not the financial because of social platforms. So companies have to be able to navigate that and actually bring people back to self-awareness and get them on the path to wealth. All right. And period. And then they're also battling the cultural consequences of the youth caring less about wealth and power and more about time and lifestyle. So the goal of the book is for us to plant our flag in the sand and say, Culture Matters can help you with this. And these next handful of books help address these problems. And so, hey, look at us. We might be a good partners for you in the future. On an individual level, there will be, as we grow as an organization, more products for the general person, right? Let's say somebody listens is saying, wow, I want to start a podcast. I need to understand how to be a good host. So like, yeah, the culture map would help them. We have to be able to deliver that to them. Or else, shame on us, right? Because at this juncture, there aren't those offerings for the general populace, because I'm deeply entrenched with the leaders of industry. That's not fair for those that aren't. And it's quite boring for me. I'm not bored. I'm just saying boring, more boring than it would be if I could help more people, I guess you could say.
I want to ask one question so I don't run out of time. If I could squeeze this question. in your evolution as a host, and I think you're the best host I know, really. I'm not just saying that because you're my friend. Because you are. I told you that. Troy said the same thing, right? Other people have told me that.
I would argue that we're friends because I am.
Well, we may be, but you're still.
Well, then,
I'm not saying. I'm not saying it because we're friends. I'm saying because it's the
yeah,
truth.
I mean, I'm in agreement
Right?
with that. I'm
Yeah.
saying that
And by the way,
the audience can, the
three
audience can
weeks.
learn from that. Like,
Oh yeah.
our friendship organically revealed itself because I am trying to be this way with people.
Yeah.
So this is a beautiful relationship that we have. I don't have this relationship that I have with you with everybody that's ever come to the show. In fact, a lot of people don't like me. That's fine. I'm unlikable in a lot of ways.
No,
I'm sorry that I interrupted. I got emotional.
no, that's not true. You're not unlikely. In 3 weeks, you cut your hair. So, uh, so hold on. I got it. Forgot the question. Oh, when you started this to now, do you finish an interview or did you finish an interview and say, did you self-evaluate yourself? How did I do? How could I have done? Or do you listen to them and say, "Oh, why did I ask him that question?" Or I didn't sound good. Is that part of your self-improvement? Is to listen to yourself and be critical of yourself? Is that part of? Do you still, if you did it? I don't know if you did it. If you did it, do you still do it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where this tool can become great for the host to grow as a person and not just harvest influence and monetize. I have apologized to people for, I felt like I've, let down the guest by being curt or not, because I've made mistakes on the show. There's people I actually there's someone that comes to mind like it's like, oh, did I ever apologize to them? So I need to look at that. But yes, constantly I reevaluate how I'm doing. I'm there's me talking to, and then there's me watching us right now as we talk. And so we're all here right now interacting in this conversation. When this is over, I'm going to think about everything that was said and asked, and I'm going to evaluate so as that I can be improved. People are always telling me that I'm not the same person I was, last month or 6 months ago, or and I think that's part of it.
Is anybody though?
Yes.
You think people
And
say
we
the
all
same?
are at varying degrees of psychology based on things that have happened in our life. We get stuck even at certain stages. And if I wasn't stuck in certain ways, I wouldn't be so interested in developing. It's like the paradoxes are infinite. But yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I am of the belief that it's those that really impact. We have a chance. I believe in the potential that we all have to impact each other. But I do not believe that we're all just impactful. That was like everyone just deserves a trophy. Well, not necessarily. In one sense, we do because we're equal under God. Like we're equal amongst each other. We can treat each other lovingly. In another sense, we're not equal whatsoever. And there's just infinite levels of not equal and disequilibrium. So, no, it takes a lot. And it's deceitful because success deceives us to believe we're growing when we are not. Success undermines growth. Power, like influence, undermines growth. Example. And I'm not the only person saying this. I could be sitting in a crowded place reading a book, leveling myself up. And then in 10 years, I could be reading in a place trying to read a book with 17 people asking me, can I have a picture?
Yeah.
So that success undermines itself.
My friend, this has been another enjoyable session with you, always. And you actually gave me another topic to talk about for next week. So, um, as always, my friend, you know that I just want to finish. There's a book, okay, called Tuesdays with Maury. Have you ever read it?
No, it sounds great.
Tuesdays with Maury. Now, he's got kind of a somber theme to it. Tuesdays with Maury. Let me see. I forget the guy's name that wrote it. But the reason it's so impactful to me, yeah, Mitch Albom. He's Mitch Albom with the Detroit Free Press wrote it. What it was is he used to meet every Tuesday with a guy named Maury, and Maury had ALS, which my dad had, which I was just tested for, right? But I think I'm probably going to have to write a book called Sundays with Jay and talk about this because this is
I'm in.
I'm in. So thank you, my friend. I will see you next week, and stay on the line after we say goodbye to your listeners.